Good evening and welcome. This is the India Today Newstrack. I'm Rahul Kanwal. What would be the best re-entry strategy for India during lockdown phase 2.0? How can we protect lives and yet at the same time ensure that there is minimal disruption to livelihood? That's my top focus on the Newstrack tonight. I want to take you through all the headlines we're tracking. We have about 14 hours to go before Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the nation at 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. This won't be one of his 8 p.m. addresses to the nation. Instead, it will be a recorded video message being put out at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Our entire National Bureau is working across government departments, trying to pull out the insights in the works. Remember, there are multiple proposals from each of the big ministries that have been sent across to the Prime Minister's office that is compiling all the possible alternatives and will stitch together the plan that the Prime Minister will announce tomorrow morning. This is our best sense of what's going into the making of that big announcement about Lockdown 2.0.
It's the all-important address that will decide India's future course on the lockdown and the COVID-19 fight. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address the nation on Tuesday morning, the last day of the 21-day nationwide lockdown. The Prime Minister's office tweeted about Modi's fourth video message the entire country is waiting for. India Today has learnt that the centre is planning partial relief for agriculture and industry sectors. The government is all set to work with large industries for staggered resumption of work. India Today has accessed exclusive details of the Confederation of Indian Industry proposal to the group of ministers led by Rajnath Singh. The industry body has proposed calibrated and safe exit from the lockdown subject to geographical spread of COVID-19. The industry group has proposed classifying India as red, amber and green based on the incidence of COVID cases. Areas with no cases may be marked green, allowing unfettered travel. Restrictions may be in place for amber zones, while full lockdown will continue in the red zones. The proposal says that all facilities that will reopen must have requisite health, sanitation and screening systems in place to protect workers. According to the CII proposal, manufacturing, e-commerce and construction may be permitted to open up partially, perhaps 25% to begin with in the first phase. In phase 2, all other sectors could be restarted with 25% resumption initially, which may be scaled up to 50% and eventually 100%. The CII has also proposed a two-fold economic package and fiscal expansion directed towards the bottom of the pyramid and enhanced credit to industry through banks. The centre is also considering industry proposal to bring back the migratory workforce, which abandoned the urban area soon after the lockdown was announced.
All eyes are on the much-awaited speech by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday. Whether there will be any sort of relaxation in certain key sectors is something to watch out for. But as India enters a decisive phase 2 of lockdown, there is much more to wait and watch for. With camera person Kirpal, this is Kamaljeet Sandhu in Delhi for India Today.
I want to go across at this time to our National Affairs Editor Rahul Srivastav. He joins us on this broadcast. Rahul, you've been speaking to sources across ministries. What is tomorrow's address likely to look like? What's the best sense you have about what to expect tomorrow morning?
Rahul, on the day the Prime Minister met the Chief Minister, you had said a line that lockdown 2.0 is going to be different from the first one. And that's perhaps what the picture till now is, that lockdown 2.0 will mean social distancing protocols as they were. It will mean that there will be a large sense of lockdown across the country, extended by 2 weeks or even say April 30th, as many chief ministers already have. But there will be exemptions and exceptions. Now, exceptions is in tune with what the Prime Minister has said, Jaan bhi, Jahan bhi, means livelihood and worldly issues need to be addressed. And in that, there are various grades of exemptions for which the Prime Minister's office has received hundreds and thousands of suggestions, be it the 11 empowered committees which were created by him, the group of ministers, various stakeholders, industry, agriculture, and others. Now, one thing is very clear: agricultural activities, be it harvest, procurement, sale and distribution, and food processing, will see exemptions. That's guaranteed. The other is industry. Now, what kind of industries can be given what kind of exemptions? There are broad 15 odd categories which we are looking at, in which what one can say that industries with high degree of mechanization, means labor intensity is lower, they can be on board, they can perhaps see exemptions. A lot of industries which are large industries, instead of having 3 shifts a day, they can go in for 1 shift. They will have to have single entry, sanitization facilities and others. Also to ensure that they have exclusive ferrying rights as far as the laborers
Flights
and
be
workers
allowed to resume. There was one report that came out which suggested that if the middle seat is empty, maintaining social distancing with certain new protocols in place, limited flight service will be allowed. Then there were some denials. What's our best sense of whether flights will be allowed?
Rahul, there is a very interesting story about it. A lot of international flights which were operated from India to other countries to evacuate foreign nationals, they observed a certain protocol like this, in which 1/3 of the total seating capacity was occupied, people only occupying the window seats on the 2 sides of the aircraft. And from there is an origin that possibility, there be a possibility of flights resuming. Now there is a problem in that. The problem is that nearly 1 crore people fly every year in this country, every month. Now in that scenario, even if it is brought down to 1/3 operations, it will be some 30 lakh people. And 30 lakh is a very large number of people, because to make 30 lakh people move from one point to the other, tertiary and secondary services will involve another few lakhs. And that is why there is still a question mark over it.
Rahul.
Railways is a problem because states have blocked borders. Interstate transport is a problem because states don't want entry from one other states. Transport is one issue, but I think largely all these exemptions which we talked about, and perhaps one is waiting on a final word. Will the PM announce something for distressed MSMEs and laborers? That's one thing one is still waiting for a confirmation.
But what we've seen typically so far is that the Prime Minister sticks to the big picture, and it's then the ministers who get into the minutiae, because he doesn't want to say about one particular sector and then others will say, "Par mera kya hoga?" So that's not the way they've operated so far. It'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow morning. Rahul Srivastava for joining us. Many thanks. Now, there are multiple dimensions that we need to look out for tomorrow. One, of course, is the economic dimension. The economy currently is in a COVID-induced coma. How do we bring the economy out of this coma, and what's the ventilator that can revive the economy? The other is the agriculture sector, and how do we ensure that in the harvest season, not just is the crop harvested, but farmers get their money, customers in the end are able to consume the food grains. Joining us on this broadcast, I want to welcome first Pranab Sen, one of India's best-known economists, former chairperson of the National Statistical Commission. With us also at this time is Raghu Raman, well-known corporate hand. He's been CEO of the National Grid of India. Ajay Veer Jhakar is the chairperson of the Bharat Krishak Samaj. He joins us on this broadcast, as well as also Uman Kurian. Now, Uman Kurian is a public health expert. He's looking at the lockdown, constantly strategizing what would be the best exit strategy. This is what Uman does for a living. So welcome to our guests. But before I start this conversation, I want to take you through the 4 times we've seen the Prime Minister speak about COVID-19 and about lockdowns, and how his message is changing over this period. Remember, the first time he spoke, the focus was Jaan hai to Jahan hai. As time went on, in the last time he spoke, this time to chief ministers, his thrust was Jaan bhi, Jahan bhi. So the life is important, as is the world. So now it's not just lives or livelihoods, it's about lives plus livelihood. Take a look at how the Modi message has changed during this 21-day lockdown.
Since his first address to the nation on 19th March, Prime Minister Modi's messaging on combating coronavirus seems to have been constantly evolving. In his first speech addressing coronavirus, the Prime Minister made an attempt to curb the atmosphere of fear and made a call to action to every citizen of India.
जब प्रथम विश्व युद्ध हुआ था, जब द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध हुआ था, तब भी इतने देश युद्ध से प्रभावित नहीं हुए थे जितने आज कोरोना की इस बीमारी से हैं, पिछले 2 महीने से हम निरंतर दुनिया भर से आ रहे कोरोना वायरस से जुड़ी चिंताजनक खबरें देख रहे हैं, सुन रहे हैं।
It was also when the Prime Minister prepared India for a lockdown by declaring a voluntary Janta curfew.
22 मार्च रविवार को सुबह 7 बजे से रात 9 बजे तक सभी देशवासियों को जनता कर्फ्यू का पालन करना है।
India Today's word cloud analysis of Prime Minister's first speech showed that the focus was on people and the pandemic. The next address was 5 days later on 24th March, where the Prime Minister announced a nationwide 21-day lockdown.
पूरे देश में आज रात 12 बजे से संपूर्ण देश में संपूर्ण लॉकडाउन होने जा रहा है।
This time the focus was clearly on combating coronavirus. The message was Jaan hai to Jahan hai, or if there's a life, there's a world.
अगर ये 21 दिन नहीं संभले तो देश और आपका परिवार 21 साल पीछे चला जाएगा। आपको याद रखना है, जान है तो जहान है।
9 days after announcing the lockdown, the Prime Minister put out a video message. This time the focus was on boosting the morale of the nation and making the citizens realize their collective strength in these testing times.
चारों तरफ जब हर व्यक्ति एक-एक दिया जलाएगा, तब प्रकाश की उस महाशक्ति का एहसास होगा जिसमें एक ही मकसद से हम सब लड़ रहे हैं, ये उजागर होगा।
The call was to light a candle or a diya at 9 p.m. for 9 minutes, but the message of fighting the coronavirus by following the rules of distancing was re-emphasized.
देशव्यापी लॉकडाउन ने आपके घर के दरवाजे पर एक लक्ष्मण रेखा खींच दी है। आपको ये याद रखना है कि घर से बाहर पड़ने वाला आपका सिर्फ एक कदम कोरोना जैसी गंभीर महामारी को आपके घर में ले आ सकता है।
18 days after imposing the strictest lockdown in the world, the Prime Minister met state chief ministers to discuss the exit plan. While the demand for lockdown extension was unanimous, this time the Prime Minister gave a new mantra. From Jaan hai Jahan hai, it was now Jaan bhi Jahan bhi, implying that the government strategy would focus on saving lives and livelihoods. All eyes now are on Tuesday, when at 10 a.m. the Prime Minister is expected to lay out the roadmap for Lockdown 2.0. Bureau Report, India Today.
To discuss the 4 critical dimensions, public health, economic, agriculture and corporate, we're joined by 4 leading experts cutting across these 4 fields. Uman Korean is a public health initiative expert at the Observer Research Foundation. Pranab Sen has run India's National Statistical Commission, is a leading economic voice. Raghu Raman set up the NAT Grid, the National Grid of India. Ajay Veer Jakar is one of our best known voices from the agricultural sector. I want to go across to Pranab Sen first. Pranab, what's your sense of what you think the Prime Minister will say tomorrow? We compared his multiple interventions. What do you think he ought to be saying tomorrow? What's the best way of ensuring that the economy can be revived from this coma which has been induced by COVID?
It's difficult to say what the Prime Minister will announce. But I mean, I think let's be very clear. We are starting to run into the limits of the complete shutdown that we have had. So when the Prime Minister said Jaan hai to Jahan hai, he was thinking about a a 3-week period. And, we can survive 3 weeks. But the fact of the matter is that unless a certain degree of livelihood generation comes back, the Jan part of it also comes under threat, not from the disease, but from the non-availability of essentials. So at some point this has to happen. Now, we've had the most draconian shutdown in the world. Other countries have kept some production going. And not only have we shut down most production, even those which we had actually allowed to continue, which was essential goods, have run into all kinds of hurdles, both in terms of production. We are seeing what the farmers are talking about. They're not being able to move their goods. They're not being able to harvest because of lack of labor. So even those sectors which are a part of the essentials have been hurt very, very badly. Now, unless we start a phased sort of removal of the lockdown, this can really go out of hand. And what you can see is non-COVID related morbidity going up very sharply. And I think that's what he's concerned about. And hopefully he will have a game plan for
Okay,
that.
so Uman Korean, naturally people like Pranab Sen would be deeply concerned about citizens having enough to eat, the fact that patience is now running out, and yet there is the public health dimension of the crisis that we confront. If you let life get too close to normal, people are then intermingling, moving from one place to another, using public transport, going to factories, and then experts have spoken of the hockey stick-like jump that could be seen in the number of cases. So how do we ensure that we can reasonably contain the virus and yet deal with the livelihood questions that Pranab Sen and others are raising?
Thank you, Rahul ji, for having me. It is a very valid concern. The thing that we have to keep in mind is that there is no end game in sight. So we don't know how many weeks or months it will take for us to find a solution. Till we have clear treatment options or vaccines, we have to live with the virus, so to speak. So institutions, individuals, and the society as a whole will have to find ways of living with this virus. So the big challenge is to know how we can slowly go back to that new normal. But the problem here is we don't know the gap between the number of recorded cases we have and the actual number of cases. So when it was invoked, the national lockdown was the only policy option we have had. It took courage for us to take it, but we had to. Now the question is, do we know enough? I mean, have we gathered enough intelligence over the last 3
No, so
weeks?
you're asking the questions, Uman Korean. It's my job to ask the questions. It's your job to answer them as best as you can. Please answer all the questions you just raised. Do we have enough data? Was this lockdown successful? From a public health perspective, what's the best thing we should be doing?
The lockdown was successful in the sense that we have delayed the inevitable. We haven't really seen the kind of spikes that we were expecting. We haven't really seen the kind of spread that was expected. We don't have mystery fever patients thronging our hospitals. So in that sense, I would say that it is a limited success, but we don't really know the true extent of the spread unless we get into expanded testing regimes. We have to do pool testing, we have to do aggressive community surveillance, we have to do sample surveys across the country to know the true spread.
So, Raghu Raman, we have a very complicated situation on our hands. On the one side, you've got people who need food, their patience is being tested. On the other side, Uman Korean points out very correctly the lack of adequate information about just how many people are infected at this moment. And yet you've got corporate India that now wants to get some of these factories back on track so that some manufacturing can resume and the economy doesn't get into depression. How do you suggest we deal with all these competing priorities, Raghu?
So there's no doubt that the manufacturing and industry and the corporates will have to start their engine. These are very, very complicated engines which have parts that are very well integrated with each other. You can't stop one part of the engine and expect the other one to start. So if we keep this industrial engine, manufacturing engine, distribution engine stopped for a longer period of time, then it will crash. For instance, if we don't quickly start servicing the towers of telecoms, we don't starting the diesel pipelines which are going into the generators, even the communication network will fall. So if the communication network falls, the governance network falls. So I think this is a 6 feet ditch. You can't do it in 2-3 feet leaps. It has to, this is Hobson's choice that the Prime Minister has got, and it has to be both. This is not between a right and a wrong. This is between one wrong and another wrong.
Laying out the options, there are many options. With all the experience you have of being in government and outside, what do you believe, Raghuram, is the best thing for India to do in this situation?
I think we have to restart the engine. There is no alternative, because as the Prime Minister says, and Pranab also said, Jaan hai to jahan hai. Now Jaan can go by the COVID virus also and by hunger also. And once these distribution channels, the migrant workers, they go out, to bring them back is not as easy as it is to send them out. So to restart this engine, if we don't do that, I think we are running out of time anyway. So it will have to be started. There is no choice. We will have to accept.
No, but then you've got then you're running the risk of the number of infections which so far are reasonably under control, with India doing much better than most countries. That could possibly change very quickly in a country like India. I spoke to Hemant Soren, the Chief Minister of Jharkhand. He said, forget ventilators. There are parts of the Santhal Pargana areas in the tribal areas of Jharkhand which don't have hospitals.
No, so in any case, I don't think a COVID virus is required to remind us that our medical infrastructure is wholly inadequate in any way. But the point is that you cannot keep a country of our size inside for a period beyond a certain reasonable time. After that, our strategic reserves finish. Our ability to service the basic food, the farmers have to go back. Where will the next month's food come from? Where will the next month's vegetables come from? If truckers are not allowed to bring it to the mandis, how will they be servicing the
Ajay Veer Jakar, you are amongst the best experts I know on the state of the agricultural sector in India. What's your sense of how farmers have been able to cope with what's happened over the past month? What's your sense of what they're expecting should be announced tomorrow? How can we deal with all these competing priorities?
I think in the period of the lockdown, farmers have suffered considerably, and most farmers growing perishable crops like, you could say, grapes, like mangoes, muskmelon, watermelon, tomatoes, they've not found a market for their produce. So most of the produce is being allowed to rot on the fields itself because of the lockdown. And even farmers who are harvesting mustard or who are harvesting barley and wheat have had problems in selling their produce in Madhya Pradesh and in Rajasthan, and now it's going to be starting in Haryana and all, and Punjab. So I think farmers have been in great distress, and something desperately needs to be done about them. Now, the question is, what has happened is what is the government going to do tomorrow? What is the Prime Minister
What would you like to see the government do? What the government is going to do, we'll find out only 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. What would you like to see the government do?
I think because data is very bad in India, I think what we need to do is we need to give 5,000 to 10,000 rupees to around 14 to 15 crore farmers that we have. And it's not a huge sum of money. It will come, if you give 5,000 rupees, it will come to something like 70,000 crore rupees. If you give 10,000 rupees per farmer family, it will come to around 1,50,000 crore rupees. It might
Let me put that question to Pranab Sen. Pranab, can we afford this, sir? A lot of people globally have said this is where you must transfer income straight to the hands of those who need it, those who've been dispossessed. India's revenue situation already stretched, GST collections down, government revenue badly off at this moment. Can we resort to the kind of income transfers that we've seen in countries across the world, especially in countries like USA?
Do you have any idea when fiscal balances matter? Fiscal balances are a man-made creation. If the whole issue is Jaan hai, then what Mr. Jakar is saying is right. But in fact, Mr. Jakar is not going far enough, in my personal opinion, because he isn't talking about the landless labor and their plight, which is even worse than that of the farmers. So yes, it is entirely doable. Is it affordable? Well, the cost is going to have to be borne by the country for an extended period of time when we unwind the implications of this kind of a government stimulus. But that is not, I think, a choice that we have. We have to do it. Otherwise, the cure may be worse than the disease.
Kind of stimulus you would advocate, and don't just say what you think is the best case scenario, also consider the current state of India's finances.
It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, we have gotten stuck into ways of thinking which came during better times. We have a situation today where the RBI will have to monetize the government's expenditure. There is no choice. Are we worrying about inflation today? No, that worry will come much later. This has to be graded. There is enough economic expertise in the government and the RBI to be able to manage this transition. But to get hung up on numbers like the fiscal deficit is really, it's really almost...
Raman, when I was speaking to top voices from corporate India on the broadcast last night, everyone said, this is what my sector needs, this is what my sector needs, and to some extent they're right, because each sector is badly off. But the point is, if each sector starts expecting financial incentives from the government, that stretches government's limited finances even more. How can the government deal with some sectors? Should some sectors be termed priority sectors and bailed out? How do you decide who to help, who not to help? It's a bit like patients in the ICU, everybody needs that ventilator. Who do you give it to?
So resources will always be on short supply in any kind of a crisis. I think you must understand that money is only a representation of the movement of the economy. Even if you transfer the hands of the farmers, unless they have goods to buy, what is that paper going to do for them? And the goods are not going to come unless the engine is restarted. So obviously there will have to be certain sectors like farming, like transportation, which will have to, like manufacturing, low-end manufacturing, which will have to start so that at least the essential goods start coming back into the circulation. The money is only a representation to buy that. If the goods are not there, what good is the money going to do? So I think the starting of the engine will have to be done with the essential segments, which obviously will be the food and the basic necessities first, and the luxury items and the high-end items, real estate, all of that will have to be, backloaded. That will have to come much, much later. The immediate sustenance products will have to be the one that will have to be given priority, and that's the way to restart the engine.
Lots of very crucial questions, and there are no easy answers. But what we've had over the past 20 minutes is 4 top experts give their best sense of what the PM should do and what he can afford to do at this moment. Remember, this will be one of the toughest decisions the Prime Minister is going to take in his career. Of that, there can be no doubt, because everyone's looking up to the Prime Minister. Everybody has huge expectations. His hands, in so many ways, are tied. I hope that Pranab Sen, Uman Korean, Raghu Raman and Ajay Veer Jakar, you can join us tomorrow, soon after the Prime Minister has spoken, to tell us what you think he did in comparison with what you were expecting and what you think will happen going into the future. Thank you for joining me on the Newstrack tonight. We're slipping into a very quick break. When we come back, we will do a deep dive, a data-driven deep dive into how India did during this 21-day lockdown. And there'll be lots of data sets put together by the India Today Data Intelligence Unit. I'll put them out for you, and I will have one of the world's leading experts on public health, Dr. Ashish Jha, daily appearance on CNN and various international media. He's been talking about how the world is doing in this battle. We'll take him through the Indian data, get him to comment on how India is doing. Also, the 5th in an India Today series of exposés during this lockdown, the masks mafia, how N95 masks are being black marketed. Before I go across live to Massachusetts and Boston to talk to one of the world's leading public health experts, Dr. Ashish Jha, I want to take you through some of the other big headlines we are tracking in India's battle against the coronavirus. In its daily briefing, the Ministry of Health said that a core strategy group has been formed to monitor new drugs and repurposing of drugs in the ongoing battle against COVID-19. Health Ministry also said that public sector units, private players and the government are working towards this goal. RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das has said that the RBI will use any instrument necessary to revive economic growth hit by COVID-19. RBI said it was important to ensure finance is kept flowing seamlessly to various sectors. The Central Bank Committee, however, believed the macroeconomic fundamentals of the economy were strong. Two doctors from the ESI hospital in Coimbatore have tested positive for COVID-19. The doctors got infected after treating COVID-19 positive patients. There are 376 COVID-19 cases in Kerala. The aviation sector is also adopting social distancing measures to battle COVID-19. SpiceJet has come up with a seating arrangement for their coaching. Once operations resume, no passenger will sit on seats marked X. Even standing space in SpiceJet buses has been earmarked. We're now towards the end of the 21-day lockdown. Over the next 15 minutes, I'll take you through on the Corona India dashboard powered by the India Today Data Intelligence Unit, the latest metrics that we're getting from across the globe and from every state and every city in India. And to help us make sense of how we're doing, because what we can do as journalists is bring out the data and distill it and put it out on the screen. What we need to do then is go across to one of the world's leading public health experts to try and make sense of what this data is telling us relative to how India is doing vis-a-vis other countries of the globe. And for that purpose, I'm delighted to be joined once again by Dr. Ashish Jha, Director of the Harvard Health Institute. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time for us once again. So let's start with the daily new cases. This is the latest metric. What you're seeing is these are the states in which maximum number of cases are coming out every single day. Here on the left side of the screen is the date that we're referring to, and you see which state is throwing up the maximum number of cases. Initially, a lot of cases were coming in from states like Delhi, from states like Kerala, but over the last several days, the maximum number of cases have been coming in from Maharashtra. So at this moment, the number of cases of the coronavirus in Maharashtra are actually higher than anywhere else, virtually double that of Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan and Delhi. Then you've got Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir next in line. So Maharashtra is #1 impacted state, and even there it's Mumbai that is taken the prime hit. So that's as far as the number of new cases go. This is the trajectory tracker, which is now on your screen. We're looking here at the number of deaths. So when you look at the number of deaths, in China the number of deaths is stable. Now for the last several days it's been stable. The red graph is the Chinese graph, the one that I just clicked. This is China. The number of deaths now very, very stable. Let's just try and come in closer so people can see these lines. In India, you've got the curve in a very important position, because if you look at one particular state, you can say that the curve is bending, but if you look at the curve of deaths, it's still not coming down. But remember, this is just the number of deaths. Whereas if you see the United States, now a lot of what's being said by the president and his health experts is the number of deaths is beginning to plateau. So Italy has now clearly seen the worst, because here you can see the curve relatively flat. So they've now got the situation under control. So my first question to Dr. Ashish Jha, just on the basis of what we're seeing in a global context, Dr. Jha, what's your sense of where India is poised in the battle against COVID-19? How do you think the lockdown went? And that curve, which is not skyrocketing just at this moment, but isn't flattening either, what does it tell you?
Yeah, so thank you again for having me on. You know, it takes about 2 weeks after people stop moving, after a lockdown, to really start seeing its effects, both in terms of cases, and then deaths come another week after that. So what I see when I look at the India data compared to the rest of the world is, as I have said before on this show, that India acted early. I think that's great. That's why the number of cases is still low. Of course, social distancing in India hasn't been perfect. We've seen large crowds still come together. We saw what happened with the migrant workers. And so you would expect that it would take a little bit longer and the effect would not be as strong in India as it might be in some other places. But again, the number of cases is still low, and I expect some more flattening of that curve in the next week or so. And then I expect deaths to continue rising for probably another few days after that. But then, of course, there are going to be important questions about what happens when the lockdown ends and people start moving around even more again. What happens then? And that's something
so
we
we've
all have
spoken of what's happening in India as a whole vis-a-vis other countries of the world. Let's now try and dive into some of the Indian states and get Dr. Jha's understanding on this. Now remember, this dotted blue line is the line that your country would be on if number of cases was doubling every 2 days. This dotted red line is the line that our country would be on if the number of cases was doubling every 5 days. So what we have over here are the different states. Now the good thing is that Tamil Nadu, which was on a 2-day curve, now especially because of the Tablighi Jamaat, now things have relatively calmed down in Tamil Nadu, but it's still less than the 5-day curve, which means it's between 2 and 5 days, roughly around 3 days, that the number of cases in Tamil Nadu are doubling. That's also been the case in Delhi. So there's a huge spike, but then after that, it's kind of relatively calm, not completely under control, but not as bad as it could be. And Kerala, of course, is the one outlier where they've really been able to flatten the curve. The light green is Kerala, and this is the one state where you can see, even though they had a big uptick right at the beginning, they've now been able to bring the number of cases under control. The other state, which is seen the biggest and the longest line over here, is Maharashtra, the deep saffron state, where you've got the curve extending the furthest. But from what this seems, Dr. Jha, and I want your understanding of it, in none of our states at this moment, and knock wood for that, is the situation spiraling out of control. Yes, we've got some pockets of concern in Tamil Nadu, in Delhi, in Maharashtra, but touch wood, net, it's not got out of hand yet.
I think that's right. And again, this is the benefit of the national lockdown. That is, we're seeing the benefit of that. We know that it has dramatically reduced how much activity there is. Of course, everybody's feeling the cost of that lockdown in terms of economic loss. But what it has meant, it has kept the virus from spiraling out of control anywhere, including even Maharashtra, which, as you said, has so many cases. So I think this is the benefit of that lockdown. If we keep the lockdown going, we will continue to see it rise at a much slower pace. And then, of course, the only caveat to this, Rahul, that's worth understanding is that, and I've said this before, testing is still not as robust as it needs to be. And so, of course, that means there may be other cases we're not seeing, other outbreaks and hotspots we are not seeing. That all said, the data to me says the lockdown is working. It really has slowed things down, and that's very good news.
Show our viewers data compiled by the University of Oxford, researchers at the University of Oxford, which looks at the stringency of the lockdowns. India apparently has the strictest lockdown in the world. Along with South Africa and New Zealand, India has 100, which is the maximum you can get on the stringency index. Remember, a stringent lockdown isn't necessarily a good thing. It just means that of all countries in the world, we have the most stringent conditions for lockdown. Next comes Italy at 95. Then you've got Spain at 90.5, you've got Germany at 80.1, in a country like the United States about 66.7. Now, what's your sense? The stringency of the lockdown for a country like India, and you trace your origins back to our country, is that a good thing? Because a lot of people would say, Dande ke dam pe hota hai yahan pe, if you let people roam around, then they'll run havoc. So it's good to lock people up because that truly is the only thing to do.
Yeah, no, look, lockdown, so India, first of all, I think the Oxford metrics, India has done a very good job. It's been a very aggressive lockdown. You can have the policy, of course, not everybody is compliant, but most people are, and I think that's really made an important difference. And we can see it in the data. We can see it in the fact that the cases have not skyrocketed. Of course, the question is, how long can we sustain this? And we also know that the cost of the lockdown is so massive, especially for the poor.
You think should be done? Now, that's the point that I want to ask you towards the end.
Yep.
Here is, how the moving average of the number of new cases being reported every day. We were earlier growing at about 20%. That's now come after the lockdown down to 17%. How do you think we should approach the post lockdown 1.0 situation? What would you like to see the Indian Prime Minister say when he speaks to the nation and explains what lockdown 2.0 would look like? If you were drafting the strategy, what would you recommend, sir?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that we're not going back to normal. So the normal activities cannot continue. There are certain things that we cannot do. Mass gatherings would be a disaster, and there can be no mass gatherings for a while. So then we slowly go back to economic activity. We unlock, But, the key to staying open and staying unlocked is having a very vigorous testing infrastructure. So if I was advising the Prime Minister, I would say, communicate to people that life is not going to be normal anytime soon. Even when we get rid of the lockdown, we will have to act differently, still have to have some social distancing. But the other thing is that people have to know that we're going to ramp up testing very substantially. People are going to have to get tested and isolated. And that is how you keep the country open and moving forward. Otherwise, the country is going to have to lock down again. And that's what we want to try to avoid.
I was seeing that press conference in Washington where Donald Trump was reacting to some of the comments that you made. So that was interesting, and really appreciate you joining us with your thoughts on how you see the situation in India. Dr. Ashish Jha, Director of the Harvard Health Institute, for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you, sir. Thank you, and I hope that over the next few hours, you can virtually, as part of an extension of our medical cabinet, come back for more of your insights. We really appreciate this. Thank you, Dr. Jha. I want to shift our attention to this big investigation that we've been working on over the past few days. This deals with N95 masks. Now, N95 are surgical masks. It's supposed to be used by doctors and medical staff inside hospitals. And it's been said time and again by the Indian Council of Medical Research, by the Health Ministry, by the World Health Organization, that these masks are only for those who are in the front lines of this medical crisis. They're not to be used by normal people. But who's listening? What we found is that there's more than a 200% markup in the price at which N95 masks are being sold. They're being sold to all manner of people who have nothing to do with the medical profession because they want these masks for safety. This is what the government's saying again and again. Please do not do. Well, there are plenty of co-idiots who are not listening. I bring you now part 5 of a series of India Today investigations. This one is called The Mask Mafia.
As the demand soared, so has the black marketing of facial protection. An India Today investigation has found suppliers selling medical-grade N95 masks at a high premium. At Delhi's Wazirpur industrial area, Akul Mittal is a supplier of imported N95s. This is how he gouged our reporter on prices when he visited his office, posing as a retailer.
सर रेट का बताइए थोड़ा सा, क्या रेट लगेगा? पहले ये N95 अभी का क्या रेट है, पहले का क्या था आपका? जब शुरू में इसी को बेच रहे थे?
शुरू में जब माल बिकता है ना ये 40-45 रुपए का रेट था।
अच्छा। और अभी आप इसको 140?
तो मार्केट नैरो के हिसाब से कुछ
100 रुपये बढ़ गया सीधा।
6 रुपए की चीज़ 100 रुपये हो गई। ये तो 40-45 रुपए की आइटम थी। इंडिया में कोरोना आ गया तो सबकी यही डिमांड है, सबको N95 चाहिए।
आपने भी तो रेट बढ़ा ही दिया होगा।
सर मार्केट के सामने बढ़ाया
रेट क्या लगेगा?
140 बढ़ाया आपको, सही बढ़ाया है। बढ़ेगा ही सर, डिमांड बढ़ेगी क्यों?
तो 5000 N95 का कितना का पड़ेगा, टोटल कितना का होगा?
5000 7 लाख। हाफ रेट का इनवॉइसिंग करा दो और हाफ रेट की वो करा दो, टैक्स आधा लग जाएगा।
अच्छा, तो कैश?
हाँ दो, इसको मैं बताऊँ दिखा दूँ।
मतलब जो मार्क्स 40 रुपये का बिक रहा था आज से 2 हफ्ते पहले, वो 140 में बिक रहा है।
You heard Akul Mittal confessing that he would sell the hospital-grade masks for more than 3 times the original price. Akul Mittal is not alone. Vijendra is another distributor of masks and air purifiers. At his office in Ghaziabad, he is also price gouging the N95s.
N95 सस्ता है?
सस्ता नहीं, मतलब आज के डेट में तो सारा चीज है यार दोस्त, सब कुछ ओवर वैल्यूड है, ऑल आर ओवर वैल्यूड। वो लोग प्रॉफिट कमा रहे हैं, उनको भी महंगा मिल रहा है, हमें भी महंगा मिल रहा है। हम ये 15 रुपए से लेना चालू किए हैं, और आज सोचो क्या है स्थिति।
तो 2000 रुपये से कितना होगा?
2,40,000।
2,40,000। इस पर टैक्स वगैरह नहीं लगेगा कुछ?
ये कैश की बात है दोस्त, आपको जो बिल मिलेगा केवल 30,000 का मिलेगा, इससे ऊपर नहीं दे पाएंगे।
अच्छा,
बाकी कैसी चाहिए मुझे? मैंने 40,000 हम दे देंगे आपको उस पे बिल पे, इंक्लूडिंग टैक्स लगा के 2 लाख रुपए कैश चाहिए।
वो आ रहा है अभी लेकर के, वही गुरु नानक।
ये बोला?
हाँ, 4 ही है ना इसको। हाँ।
In the old quarters of Delhi, Suman is a wholesale trader of face masks and various other products. She admitted that the price of the N95s have gone through the roof.
जैसे गोल्ड का है ना सर, सुबह आपका रेट खुलेगा, क्या रेट है पता नहीं है। आज का रेट जो है ये है, कल का कुछ नहीं पता। 14 तारीख के बाद लोग सोच रहे हैं कि डिक्रीज होगा, ये डिक्रीज नहीं होगा, इंक्रीज होगा। क्योंकि जो 50 और दुकानें खुली है ना, उनको भी तो पता चल जाएगा कि भैया ये सब हो रहा है, तो कौन सस्ते में बेचेगा सर माल। आज के रेट है वो कह रहे हैं मेरे, 14 तारीख के बाद और बुरा हाल हो जाएगा, ये कन्फर्म। दुकानें खुलते ही सबको पता लग जाएगा कि आग लगी पड़ी है, जिसके पास माल होगा वो भी नहीं बेचेगा। कारण यही है ना कि सबको पैसा चाहिए।
कितने का पड़ेगा?
290 का लास्ट।
किस कंपनी का?
ये N95।
Let's not feed the price gougers. Let the N95s be saved for the frontliners they so desperately need. For others, homemade masks can be a good choice. A report by Mohammed Hizbullah for India Today's Special Investigation Team.
To have been able to put out 5 investigative stories during the lockdown is quite a feat, especially given the kind of limitations and lockdown our reporters were having to deal with. As always, we'll try and leave you with something to smile about. I'll be back at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. We will build up to the Prime Minister's address, go across the country, see what people would like to hear him say, see what experts would like to hear him say. Then we'll bring you the live analysis of the Prime Minister's speech and pick up reactions to that.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kanwal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.